It's gonna.
Go. So, hi everyone. I did not really prepare anything today, but I can, and I feel like I don't really know about. I mean, Thomas and Dion are on the call, and they both know far more about ggplot extensions than me. But I thought I could like talk a little bit about the history and what my core memory is of that history. And then like answer any questions you all might have. I think it I think it really was Thomas who got the extensions ecosystem started. Does that ring a bell to you, Thomas?
I think so, yeah. I think I wrote a blog post about it once after my first internship.
Well, I think
I think
you
I
made a lot of the stuff extensible like initially, right? You did the pull requests to make
yeah,
it possible.
for the
Yeah,
facets, yeah, but I also think that my inability to extend it in the first place spurred you to the whole ggproto rewrite. But that is
that's right.
speculation, but the timing lines up.
That makes sense. Yeah, I forgot about good old ggproto, the object-oriented programming system used by only one package and its descendants. Um, that's one of my many crimes against object-oriented programming in R. Yeah, like it was sort of interesting. Like, I guess that was the time around the time where I think like ggplot2 was kind of really taking off in popularity. And until that point in time, I'd been like really hands-on with ggplot2. Like basically kind of my goal when ggplot2 was starting off was like when anyone said anything about ggplot2 anywhere on the internet, I would be there. And I had like back in the day, you could like subscribe to a search on Google, so it would email you when anyone ever mentioned ggplot2. And so if like anyone said anything bad about it, I'd be like there being like, hey, like I'm a developer, like is there something I could do to make this better for you? And it was really active on our help and it's there as well. But it became like pretty clear pretty quickly, like that was unsustainable and like I just could not continue doing that. Um, and so around that time, like that was sort of in the more of the era of mailing lists. So it was a pretty big ggplot2 mailing list at the time where I had kind of been like, if anyone answers a question, I will answer it. And so then I also at that time I said like I'm not going to do that anymore. Like I can't do that anymore. And like please other people in the community step forward. And I think that was like one of the experiences that was like really kind of transformative for me in general in terms of like I'm not terribly good at like giving up control of stuff or responsibility for stuff, but doing that with the ggplot2 mailing list, like I stopped answering questions and it actually like created a lot of space for other people to like step in and answer questions and contribute and learn and grow. And I think that's kind of around the time that the sort of the extensions started picking up, or there started to be some ecosystem. I don't know when was I don't even remember when the ggplot2 extensions website um, got started.
That's some time after,
It
pretty
was
sure.
sometime.
Yeah.
Because who did that initially? Was it Daniel? Yeah.
No, I have forgotten the name.
Because that
I
was
did
also
research for
the
this talk.
because there was also the relatively infamous accidental, like the domain name for the ggplot2 extensions expired and it got purchased by like a Russian porn site. So there was a brief period where like ggplot2 extensions x.org was like a Russian porn site, which I was kind of like horrified by, but also like It just seems like such a niche, like how can you make money from that? Like how many people looking for ggplot2 extensions are now like, oh, I can't find anything about ggplot2 extensions. I'll just watch some porn instead. Like it just seems like such a crazy business model that, but I guess they just like look at, some automated thing looking for expired domain names and buying up ones that have some modicum of traffic. So I think that was kind of the period we like after that, obviously I was like, let's take this under our umbrella so that we control the domain name, and this never happens again. Yeah, and sort of so extensions are kind of always one of the things I think in ggplot2. Like there's quite a few things in ggplot2 that I know are like really important and valuable and people like and care about, but I have like basically zero interest in. I think like the extensions are kind of one of that. I 100% believe that they're like super valuable, like incredibly valuable. And the fact that there's now like 130 plus ggplot2 extensions just seems like crazy to me. But it's equally something I'm just not interested in working on this. So another thing that I know is also really important is like the theming system in ggplot2, which was early on mostly contributed by Kosuke Takahashi. Like again, something like I know is like really like I know it's really valuable, but it's just so hard for me to like rustle up the enthusiasm to like work on that. So I think that's kind of like in some ways now like the maturity of the ggplot2 ecosystem is that it has like the maintainership like passed from me to Thomas, and then I mean really like from Thomas to Yun, and who knows what will happen next. But it seems like there's only like so many years that any one person can maintain one package without getting bored of it. But I've been thinking a little bit. The ggplot2 is going to turn 18 in June next year, so I'm thinking about having like some kind of like ggplot2 is going to like college celebration next year.
How about voting?
Would be fun. I could vote. Yeah. Only it was a citizen. Yeah. Probably been able to buy a gun for quite a long time now, especially in Texas. But yeah, that's fine. Anyway, so those are kind of like my sort of vague, not very well put together thoughts about extensions, but I'd love to, just chat with you all, answer any questions you might have, subject to the whims of my not terribly good memory.
Well, if you want to drop questions in the chat, we can do that. But I think we're a small enough group that we can just take questions as they come. If you want to raise your hand to jump in, that works. I guess I have a question to start off with, and I guess it's on, and maybe it's like a little bit to Thomas. I feel like just like when you write an extension package, like how do you figure out what the scope should be? So I think like there's some like really like extension packages that are really focused. I was thinking like David's ggBump comes to mind, and it's like it's the ggBump package, and then there's ggforce that's like, what is in there? It's like it has so much. So, I mean, it's a question to everybody, I think, that's on this call too. But Hadley, you should weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of think about this, I think, quite a lot, like in the tidyverse, like what is the kind of scope for a package? And I really believe like it's valuable to keep a package like fairly scoped. and fairly focused, that it is like a sentence or two that kind of captures the spirit of that package. You know, in some ways that's what like forced the ggplot2 extensions to exist. It was just stuff where I'm like, this doesn't feel to me in my heart of hearts like it belongs in ggplot2. Like it should, like 100% should exist and be on CRAN, but it doesn't feel to me like it's part of ggplot2. So it's like finding that kind of like core idea and sticking to it, I think is really important. I'm not sure like if I can like really articulate like why I think that's so important. But I think there's definitely something about like if you want people to use your tool, be able to find your tool, it has to have some kind of unifying, cohesive theme. And there's certainly like a space for like these kind of like MISC packages where it's just like a random collection of useful stuff. But I think it's really hard for people to kind of like remember, like there needs to be some kind of concept in their head that kind of sticks and they can grab onto. I know, Thomas, if you wanted to chime in on that.
Yeah, so you're absolutely true, or it's absolutely true that ggforce is like whatever sticks on the wall. I also vividly remembered like starting that package when like the first version of ggplot2 that allowed extensions. I was so excited, and I was like, if anyone just have an idea and they don't want to maintain a package, like this is the place to put it. Like let's just collect a bunch. The good thing about like unfocused packages that you only really need one, because then that can kind of be a catch-all for everything that doesn't fit anywhere else. So like there's no need for me to have more than ggforce and then a bunch of focused extension packages, because if I don't, and I must say like development of ggforce has also slowed considerably down, partly because there are so many of you that makes extensions and I'm only me. So there's really no need for me to spend time like collecting all these various features. But it's also like, I think it's true from Hadley's, what Hadley say, that as a user, you need like, it's way easier to start using a tool if the tool has like a cohesive story that it tells. Like what can this solve for you, and especially if it does it in a very cohesive way. And it's very hard for like packages that just collect random stuff to have a cohesive like idea around them. But I can also feel that like I really dread looking at ggforce, because it's just this bunch of stuff. Like it's very hard as a developer to situate yourself into that package once you like, if you've been away for a year, which I at least have been from ggforce. Like just opening that project again is just like, oh, I don't want to touch it. Like I'm sure it works. There's no need for me to look at it. It's so much easier for focused packages to receive continued attention from the developer. So I think that in itself is a boon and gives longevity to a package, the tool. So I do believe you're giving yourself a great gift if you kind of sit down and define what you want to do, both because it's easier to sell to users, but it's also easier to sell to yourself whilst maintaining it.
But it is also like hard when you get started out. You do just have like 5 random functions that are useful to you, and if there's no consistent theme between them, like having 5 different packages is not the solution either. So like in some ways I do think these like MISC packages are kind of like a natural period in the life cycle of a package. It just sometimes takes you a while to figure out like what is the cohesive story. And it's okay to have a MISC package for a while, that then you realize, oh, these 10 things are actually all instances of the same problem, and I'm going to move them into a package. And now that I think about them in like rows and columns, I can see like there's bits missing here and here, and fill out the whole problem space.
So, David, if you wanted to respond, because I mentioned you, and like I feel like even the name, like ggBump, you kind of narrowed to. do thematically. Were you tempted to put random stuff in there?
Yeah, but I started with a weird R package called Ablar, which is my MISC package for whatever I came up with. And it was like a ggforce. It's just a random bunch. But then I found more enthusiasm doing very scoped things. So bump charts for ggplot, that was one extension, and then ggstream, and then ggsankey. More like an intellectual problem because they're pretty complex plots, stream plots and Sankey plots. But that's why they're really hard to maintain. Well, I have 2 kids, and it's so hard to be so deep inside ggplot. It takes at least 2 days just to get all the information in your head again. So I'm struggling with maintaining them, but it's really nice to have a really scoped package. I agree.
And then we could hear from Corey and then Cynthia.
Yes, this is another question, I guess, if we're wrapping up the previous question. I'm interested in the maintainers, in particular, thoughts on the range of, and I say this, it's a value-loaded term, but I don't mean it that way. The range of fidelity with which extensions adhere to the rigorous grammar of graphics as originally put forth. The packages I'm aware that they range from extensions that are very meticulous with respect to like what the aesthetics refer to and what the geoms are, to these things that are sort of analogous to auto plot functions for new data types. And I think they're all very valuable. ggplot2 is wonderful for the aesthetics it brought, as well as for the rigor. But that also produces issues, for example, when you have different extensions that are not compatible with each other because they don't adhere to the principles in the same way. So, but that's just my own, like, one example of what might arise out of that. So do you have thoughts generally on what to make of that kind of ecosystem?
I have thoughts.
Mm,
While Hadley is
yeah,
thinking.
Thomas probably has a lot of thoughts based on his experience with rep dipchicks. But you go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah. No, I think so there is an academic side to the question, and then there is the what do you feel as a maintainer side. And to tackle the last one first, like as long as the extension is well behaved, like as long as it is using the extension mechanism as it was intended and communicated, then everything goes. Like, go wild, go crazy, and solve the problem that you're trying to solve. Our biggest issue are very creative developers that that needs to solve that problem and does that by any cost. And of course that is great, but ggplot2 has so many dependencies or reverse dependencies that, like, we cannot change a single sign without breaking someone's code, because someone is in there, like, grabbing stuff they shouldn't pull out and using it in unintended ways and so on. And this is sounding very like, please don't do that, this is hurting my life. But it's more around, like, it is very tedious and it's very slow process to actually update ggplot2. And of course ggplot2 doesn't need that much updating, but like, we can at most make a release every year with new changes in it, because it takes so much energy to go through all the breaking packages that we break just because we are changing something that we should be allowed to change. Now, to the academic side of it, I think it would be fantastic if everyone kind of took the ideas of ggplot2 and the grammar and kind of extended that rather than like building high level functions on top of it, because it makes it way easier for things to interact. But I'm also like, that's not going to fly. Like, that's a pipe dream in some sense, and sometimes you need to solve a problem, and I'm fully like, I need to do that as well, and I have certainly steered away from the grammar from time to time as well. So I totally get that is needed sometimes, but it would be nice, like, if you, it's better to be a bit more on the side of the original API and give up some fancy ideas that you had, I think, rather than like throw it all in the bin and just like do crazy stuff. It's also easier for the user because they don't have to like context switch between extensions.
Yeah, I know it's a complicated question. Like, in some sense, it feels to me like a success criteria for the ggplot2 extension ecosystem is like people creating things that I think are terrible ideas or like horrible. Like that's a good thing, right? That's a sign of strength, that the community is not just limited by my vision and my aesthetics. And the not in the ggplot2 sense, in the like visual and log sense. So, and there's also this challenge of like, if you want to do something, you want to extend ggplot2 in a way that's not been done before or is not strictly allowed, but you can figure out a way to kind of hack around it. Like, should you do it or not? Like, on the one hand, yes, it's great. Like, go ahead and like do it. But on the other hand, like, if you're relying on internals of ggplot2, there are kind of like no guarantees, and then it does shift like the burden back to the maintainers of ggplot2 if something breaks. Like, it still feels like our responsibility, because now you've got a bunch of people using your package. It's clearly not their responsibility. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I think ideally, like, yes, people should use the grammar as much as possible. Like, it's a great, obviously I'm a great believer in that as a theory to unify many types of graphics. And if you can frame what you're doing in terms of one of the existing components of the grammar, that's like really powerful, because now it combines, nicely with a bunch of existing stuff that people can use. But there's also like, there is also a room for not just like grammars of graphics, but typologies of graphics, where you are like, in some domains there are, like 7 plots that everyone wants to do. And if you can expose them behind some kind of useful front end that requires less typing or less thinking or whatever, that seems valuable to me too. So I'm not, and then, on top of that, like most people writing R packages are not professional programmers, they're not even like even necessarily paid to do the project. This is something they're doing like for fun in their free time. And so I feel like I just find it very hard to be like kind of tough on those people. Like, I kind of appreciate like whatever you can do is great. And it does feel like, I think one of the things that, like, in return for me and Thomas and Tjorn being paid to work on ggplot2, that means it's our responsibility to take on like some of this pain from the community and suffer through it, because it's better for us to suffer than for everyone else to suffer. Maybe Thomas believes that less, since he's the one that's suffering doing the rep checks, and I no longer have to suffer that. But I think, like, I think we're all aligned, and like, we want to support the user community. We accept that, like, we're full-time professional programmers, which is pretty unusual in the R community, and we want to do what we can do to support everyone, get better and grow over time.
I think we could hear from Cynthia, and then June and Joyce.
Thanks. There's actually a lot of questions that I think I could ask, but I'm really curious. I think it was quite nice you were so frank about the parts of like ggplot that were just like not interesting to you. And I wanted to kind of you touched upon sort of like that period where you're really super hands-on with ggplot2, and like I was wondering if you could just speak a bit more to like that part of the story of like, you built this tool, like you clearly knew a lot about the grammar graphics, you like it feels like, and this is me kind of putting my own interpretation, like you really like believed in the potential of this thing. And I just wonder, like, like what was your thinking there? How did you decide, obviously to invest that much, but also then the transition out of that, like what that kind of looks like?
Yeah, so I think there was really like, I think the thing that really led to ggplot2, or like ggplot existing, was a combination of me like writing a lot of R code, both like base plots and lattice plots, to try and solve visualization problems, and finding it like just having the sense it felt harder than it should be, and there were just weird things that didn't feel right, and then reading the grammar of graphics and being like wow, like this is the way we should be thinking about graphics. Like I want to go and use this now. And there was like no open source implementation of the grammar of graphics at that time. And so that really motivated me. And that was like during my PhD, where I was doing consulting for a lot of other PhD students. And then kind of after that, like when I joined Rice and I was teaching, like it was very like direct motivation. Like these are problems that I see, like I'm having, that I see people having, that people are struggling with. Like, how can I like fix those problems? And I'd say like that's sort of all, like that's what got me into it. And in some sense, that's kind of what like led me out of it as well, because like I wanna, like my goal seems to be to like make data science or data analysis easier for you. And so it felt like at some point, like ggplot2 was like good enough that it was no longer the bottleneck. Like the bottleneck, and ggplot2 kind of evolved with like tidyr, like co-evolved with tidyr. So it sort of felt like, oh, like, you can get the data, you can get it in the right format, that you can actually use it with ggplot2. But how do you actually get the data like into R? Oh, like, sure, if you've got a CSV file, that's great. But what if you've got an Excel file? Well, that's kind of painful. There's like nothing very good. Like there was, I think, stuff that used like Java and other things that were like painful to set up. Or like, what if your data lives in a database? Like you've got DBI, but a lot of these backends kind of work a little weird or crash or have problems. So then that really got me thinking, well, like, what if you want to scrape, get data from an API, scrape data from a website? So that really pushed me more onto like, well, how do you get data? And so like I'm sort of driven by like, like where are the hotspots? Where are the pain points? Like as some tools, as tools get better, existing pain goes away and kind of new pain like creeps up. And that's sort of like one of the reasons, like one of the things I've been sort of turning my attention to more recently is like this problem of like R in production. Like doing data analysis in R, like, it's not like perfect, but to me, it doesn't feel like that is where the pain, the excruciating pain for people lies currently. The pain is like, you've done that analysis and now you need to run it repeatedly, like on another computer, and get the reports to someone else in your organization. Like, how do you do that? And where are the missing pieces? So I definitely have a lot of love in my heart, ggplot2. Like clearly it's the thing that like I am still most well known for. I have like a literally ridiculous number of citations from that. But at the same time, I'm like driven to solve this problem more broadly, not just visualization. And it feels great to kind of, be able to hand off ggplot2 to kind of the next generation of people to care about it. And, having this extensions community is awesome too.
June, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Hi, Hadley. This is a very specific question about something that you wrote in the extending ggplot vignette like almost 10 years ago, actually. So there's one sentence in there where you say the naming of layer construction functions using stat underscore and geom underscore was an early design mistake, and that you should have called them layer underscore instead. So I'm kind of curious whether you still believe this to be the case after seeing ggplot get so successful, and what you might have imagined the counterfactual world of layer underscores to look like.
Yeah, I don't remember what I was thinking then. But I have to say, like, I think one of the things that feels like a little unappealing about the grammar is that the geoms and stats are so tightly intertwined. Like it's not 100% true, but by and large, like there's a one-to-one correspondence between the geoms and the stats. Like, sure, you can use stat bin with things other than geom histogram, but kind of mapping the aesthetics in the right way makes it fiddly. So that idea that of like combine and then like the position adjustments is so tightly connected to the geom, right? Like there's only given a specific geom, there's only a limited set of possible positions. So I think like in hindsight, I wouldn't have made those quite I mean, they still probably, like maybe in the internals they would still exist, but they've been by and large exposed to the user through like a layer function. So you'd call layer histogram, which may be behind the scenes in a way that's not directly exposed to the user, still called, you know, something that a function that does bunning and then something that draws rectangles. But just the kind of that split of like geom and stat kind of, I don't know, it sort of implies this degree of orthogonality that I don't think really exists. The other like perhaps biggest, it was really a mistake, but I guess the biggest regret with ggplot2 is not like discovering the pipe earlier, because like ggplot, like that happened before ggplot2 would have been a perfect candidate for the pipe. And I don't know if many of you seen this, but I actually kind of bought ggplot back to life on my GitHub, and I call it like ggplot1. Obviously, it wasn't actually called that at the time, but ggplot like works so well with the pipe, and so why? And like then layer is nice because it's both like a noun and a verb. So you're like layering on a histogram or layering on a bunch of points. So that I think also would have worked really nicely with the pipe. So I think, I don't know, that there may be other things like 10 years ago that I didn't like about the design, but those are the things I remember today.
Joyce, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. First, I just want to thank Hadley. I mean, ggplot2 is just such an amazing and incredible thing. And every time I teach it, it's just so exciting to think about how you have this beautiful, elegant theory of grammar of graphics, and then it gets implemented, and then it gets immensely popular, which just doesn't really happen that often. A lot of the really popular tools are not the ones that you're so excited about. So
yeah,
that's amazing. And I guess it kind of leads into like, I just kind of want to chime in on the discussion about the ways that people are using the extensions in ways that weren't intended. And my stake in this is from the academic, not the coding point of view, in that I'm feeling pressure all the time to teach in Python. I've held steadfast. I teach the required course on data visualization at Data Science Institute at Columbia, and I have about 200 students a year, and they learn R in my class. They do everything in R, and I'm not backing down. But part of the way I sell it is the truth that there's statisticians and research involved in every step of the way, from the development of S to you having designed ggplot2 with good defaults in mind and the research of statistical graphics in mind and all of that. So then when they come back with all this like weird stuff, it definitely detracts from that message. Though I understand there's not a lot that can be done about it. But I don't want to be, I hate to be the police saying, don't use this package, don't use this package. I mean, it's nice when I can, with ggplot2, I can just say like, whatever you do with just ggplot2 is fine. Like there's almost nothing I can think of. Few things. I do have a few issues where I want to change, I suggest changing defaults, but mostly not. So that's just my kind of take on it all.
Yeah, I mean, I feel to me like the argument that I would make about teaching is I really do think it gets you to like the underlying concepts much faster. And there's less kind of like programming experience, skills you need. Like you can get to the data science faster. But the thing that I think is going to be interesting in terms of like framing these discussions in the oncoming years is like LLMs. And I think, like, I don't 100% believe this claim, but I think it's probably the people who are telling you to switch to Python might. And that is just like the fact that like LLMs are getting us closer and closer to this kind of universal translation where, so you wrote it in R and someone needs it in Python, like no big deal, translate it. And so the language that you learn to program in kind of matters less in that sense. So you can focus on like, how do you get the big ideas across to the students as quickly as possible. And I don't know. I just think I don't know, like when I look at what people have to do data analysis in Python, it just feels like, I don't know, it's like so much additional stuff you've got to learn that are not directly related to the challenge at hand. So. And just, I don't know, I think maybe the pendulum is starting to swing back away from like, let's do everything in one language towards like, let's pick tools based on what they're good at. And if you have to use multiple tools, then that's okay. And, again, we've got LLM, so it's getting easier and easier if you're confronted with something in an unusual language to get, to figure out what it does, to get traction, to make changes, even without fully understanding how it all works. So I don't know, my sense of like how R is doing sort of waxes and wanes over time, but it's currently like increasing, I think, like because of LLMs.
Interesting. Yeah. Just to be clear, like I'm not like against, it's just, I tell them that master students, they learn Python in their other classes, they can learn R in mine, and they should be able to handle it.
It's not a big deal to learn another programming language. Like don't freak out about it. Especially R, since it's so designed to like pick it up and drop it pretty easily. Put it away.
Well, we have Hassan on the call, so maybe he does have who's the Plot9 author. So if you did have any thoughts about, I don't know, I guess like to Hadley, I guess I wonder how interested you are in like kind of translations of ggplot2. I think Plot9 is one of them, and I think I've seen Julia Plot, or I don't know, maybe June knows. You're following the Julia world more. And like thoughts on those translations?
Yeah, the translations of ggplot2 to other languages are really interesting. Like I think that was something like 10 years ago. It just felt like someone's got to be able to do a better ggplot2 than me, like in another programming language. But it didn't. There's nothing like, there's certainly lots of great visualization stuff, but I don't think there's anything that's quite like the step up from like Lattice to ggplot2, or even in R. Like no one's come up with something that's like dramatically better than ggplot2, which in some ways I'm like a little sad about. Like I think it would be really, like I'd love to kind of be scooped by someone like that. And in some sense, like now I'm in like a position where if that happened, I'd just be like, okay, we'll like hire that person at Posit. So it's not like there's like any kind of competition. It's like working on that together. And in many ways, like that's why Hassan is at Posit now. Like he created like the best realization of ggplot2 in Python, and maybe even the best realization of ggplot that you can even do in Python, given the straight constraints of the language. And so I'm, definitely like, my philosophy is like, let's all work together on this stuff. Like, it's not a thing where like one person has to win and another person has to lose. Like, we can all win by working on this stuff together. But yeah, it really surprised me. Like, I don't know. I guess now I'm more arrogant, perhaps more confident in my programming skills. But certainly, like in the early days of ggplot2, it just felt like I can't. Like, surely someone has to be able to do this like better than me. But it does feel like it isn't like, I think doing a visualization, like writing visualization software, is challenging because it requires like quite a few different skills. Like you need the programming skills, but you also need some sense of like, what are people actually doing with data? You need to know a bit about like the psychology of like vision and perception. And I think for it to catch on, like, it has to look good as well. So you have to be able to create something that's aesthetically pleasing. It just seems like a fairly like unusual combination of skills.
Yeah, everybody's reading Thomas's comment. ggplot2 has been rewritten twice since release, so it is not that old in reality. Rejuvenation.
Oh yeah. Wonder how much of it is like, we should try and find like the ggplot2 code, like the oldest bit of ggplot2 code has remained untouched.
There's certainly something.
Yeah, I found a piece recently.
What was that, Dion?
Oh, I found a piece recently in which was commit number 1, where it was the color codes for the scale gradient 2, I think. Those have been in ggplot2 since forever, since the first commit on the repository.
Okay.
So
that's interesting. Yeah, and that's a good example of something where I've been like, at the time I felt like I made the best decision I could based on perceptual research, and I think now there are like much better color schemes we could use there, but figuring out how to change that without breaking maybe tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of plot in a while is tough.
I thought we could give Hassan a chance to speak to some of the translation stuff, and then we could hear from Gio, if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know how my getting into the translations was because I had picked up I had picked up Python, and I didn't and I really wanted to find a better way to do visualization, and I just couldn't get over what I had seen in ggplot2. Then I immediately bought the book, and still to this day, the Grammar of Graphics book remains the most expensive book I ever bought, because shipping it to Uganda cost me about over $180, which was a lot of money in like 2011. So I really bought into the concept. I just wasn't confident enough to see it through, to do it at the time, until when I felt like 2 years later, when I was like, okay, I can implement this, and the package that had tried to do it in Python wasn't doing a good job because they didn't care. I was like, okay, I think I'm the best person to see this through, and I need to maintain ownership if this is to remain true to the vision. So I never thought about Python versus R. Like Python versus R, that I'm doing that I am necessarily doing a translation. It was just like for convenience, because I stayed away from I didn't go with R because at the time the project I was interested in, which was like looking at election data, because I thought like, okay, I'll just like do this analysis stuff like once, and maybe every 3 or so years, I'll work on a project, and then like the tidyverse hadn't developed well. And R felt a little scripty and odd. I'm like, if I'm going to have to dip into the depths of this language over and over, I would have to like start from scratch. But if I had thought that I would pick up the bag of like, looking at data and all that stuff, because I know I would have like, okay, R would become my thing, and I wouldn't have to worry about picking up context and all over again. So I would have like, there's an R, but just because I thought like, oh, I'll have to, I won't be doing this permanently. I'll have to come back to a language, and I want it to look friendly every time I look at it. So I went Python, and then I got dragged into creating Plot9, and yeah. So.
Glad you could join today, and we've been in touch about maybe you giving a longer talk if you want, or maybe this checks that box for us. We'll see. Either way. Jill, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, I've always thought something that's interesting about these translations like Plot9 and Seaborn and tidier plots for Julia and so on that we've been talking about is that they don't just implement the grammar of graphics in other languages. They implement the actual literal syntax of ggplot2, like the same function names, like the same, they use pluses often, right? Instead of so like I don't use other programming languages a lot other than R. So this is not something that like dominates my every thought, but I have often wondered about this. Is there like a missed opportunity here, like Hadley was talking about, how there was no like other thing that came up after ggplot2 that like changed the way that we make graphics in the same way that ggplot2 did. And maybe that's because the grammar of graphics is just like a really much better way of thinking about graphics. But that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be other implementations of it, other ways of expressing the grammar of graphics. Like you were talking with stats and geoms, or with pipes instead of pluses and so on, right? Why do you think we have so many, essentially, like, I mean, I do not mean this in a bad way, like copies of ggplot2, right? As opposed to re-implementations of the grammar of graphics.
So I think there are some like Vega and Vega Lite and that kind of genealogy of visualization tools on the JavaScript side, which do take a somewhat different approach. I don't know really enough about the JavaScript community to kind of have a sense of like whether they've like really taken off, but I don't get the sense that they're kind of really a dominant visualization system in JavaScript. And part of the problem is like ggplot2 kind of occupies a special place in R because R is really all about data science. And ggplot2 is a really good framework for visualizing data. There are like lots and lots of other things that you want to visualize, might want to visualize that ggplot2 is like not very good for at all. Like if you're doing scientific visualization, you've got like, 4D arrays of like very, very large data sets. ggplot2 is not going to help you. And then because like other programming language communities tend to have more like diversity in the kind of visualization challenges, that maybe there's like less room for a grammar-based visualization framework to really kind of become the dominant one. Some of this is just like the R community is, because it's a little bit, I think, smaller and more cohesive, it does tend to have more centralization around packages. Like when you look at Python, like anything you can imagine doing in Python, by and large, it seems like there's always like 3 packages that are all quite popular, and you can make an argument for using any 3 of them. Whereas in R, I think that happens less frequently. So I don't know. Like, so I don't know how much of it is because like different programming languages just have like different communities and different that drives development in different ways. Some of it, I think, like ggplot2 hits, I think, kind of a sweet spot in terms of getting you up and running with creating graphics without having to learn too much of the grammar, because you can certainly swing too far towards the kind of the grammar approach where now like the first thing you have to do before you can create a plot is learn the grammar, and then that's like annoying. And sure, you get a bunch of benefits in the long run, but you need to deliver like benefits in the short run in order to get people to use your tool. So I think like, you know, and there's a lot, you know, there's all but these things, there's always just a big component, I think, of luck and timing and sort of ggplot2 happening at the right time when data science is really like taking off. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting question. Yeah, I would love to see something like a grammar of graph, like something that's even better than the grammar of graphics. That would be cool. But yeah, I don't know. I've kind of like stopped. I guess I used to kind of worry about that, like that ggplot2 would kind of become irrelevant, and now I guess I'm worried more it's like not becoming irrelevant. Like, what's going on? Like, shouldn't we have come up with something better? It's been like 20 years, almost 20 years, people. Like, come on, like let's see if we can do something better now. But also, I don't know, like you know, software, I think kind of as I get older, I kind of appreciate more things that are just like stable and have been around for a long time, and you can assume will continue to be around for a long time. So I don't know. That's an interesting question. I don't have any like good answers.
I think my take on it, if I may, is perhaps that good ideas and good implementations are extremely contagious. Like when you have been exposed to something that works really well, it's very, very hard to escape the manner in which it operates, because it infects your mind and how you think about the problem. So if the people developing new plotting visualization tools in other language are users that has been like by fortune or whatever been lured away from R and is now like, oh my god, I miss a great visualization framework, and they end up being the one developing it. I think it's very, very hard to envision a version of the grammar of graphics that is not very ggplot2 like. Not that it can't exist, but it's just the implementation has been so successul that it is just so prevalent, and it's very hard. It's like it the mental gymnastics that you have to do.
Everyone's mind.
Yeah. Those microchips during the COVID vaccinations are actually the mental gymnastics that you have to do to just like be different for the sake of being different is really hard. So I think it's very, very easy to just maybe not copy it, but be very, very inspired by it.
So we're coming up on an hour, but I guess I'll put forth a last question, which is, what are maybe some risks to consider as like we maybe want to bring new people into the extension space? Like, because I think that there is a lot of potential for more use, and like the community is becoming more mature. But you know, that's you know, more reverse dependencies for you all to manage. So yeah, kind of with that in mind, do you have any?
I wouldn't think about as risks. I would think more like, I think there are a lot of opportunities for like this community to come together and say like, these are good ways to develop extensions. these are the things that are going to make your extension robust and work well for the long term and be appealing to users. I don't think you should worry too much about the reverse dependency checks. Again, I'm not suffering the pain from them anymore, but in general, like, I don't know, like Thomas and Tieran get paid well to suffer reverse dependency checks, so you can't feel too bad for them. But I think like just framing it as like, you know, can you develop like best practices? Can you help people kind of help guide people down the path of success? Like if you do have to use ggplot2 internals, like what can you do to kind of protect yourself, or what can you do to like ensure that, you know, change in the future is you know, like accepting both that you're doing something that's like a little bit naughty and it might break in the future. So how are you going to like de-risk that for yourself? I think then all of that just, you know, helps the ggplot2 developers and the whole ggplot2 community.
I jump in with a follow-up question, just a short one. So I'm really interested actually in this like idea of best practices. So I've been sort of also in like the kind of computer science visualization community. So like I am at Monash in the kind of very R community. And there's like not, I think this also speaks to the success of ggplot is like people mention ggplot in a lot of this literature, but like it's very clear that they haven't engaged actually deeply with any of the design philosophy or like any of the systematic thinking out of that. But there's also not a lot of, I guess, academic literature or even other literature. And I guess my question is like, how do we encourage this more? And like, I guess as a little bit of self-promotion, I wrote a blog post sort of recently about like kind of wrapper functions. And like, I think to Corey's question, like, how do we actually balance this? Like, you want an auto plot, but you also want to like maintain the like kind of elegance of the grammar graphics. How could we encourage more of that? Like, I just wrote it for fun, basically, but you know, given
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's like writing blog posts, like writing, like getting the word out in the community. I think like this, you know, the ggplot2 extensions group is a great way. Like so much of this, it's like so much easier to keep momentum on when you're working on these kind of like best practices and guides if you can do it as a team. So finding other people with similar interests and just like chipping away at it over time. I mean, I like the way I always think about this is like if you want people to do the right thing, you have to make the right thing easier than the wrong thing. Like you can tell people to do the right thing and like it's as much as you want until you learn the faith, but only people act in their own self-interest. You know, people, it's not like people are lazy, but it's not like maintaining their R package is like at the top of most people's priority list, or writing the best possible R code. Like everyone has like other life going on. So figuring out how you can help those people like save time, you know, you make the community stronger, you help them, and those people, you know, feel grateful to you as well. I think it's a really, you know, virtuous cycle. And then some fraction of those people, you know, then later join a, you know, come back and help out the community in turn.
Right. Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I think we should just give Hadley a big round of applause, or virtual applause. And we really appreciate you coming. The conversation was great. Thanks, Thomas, for joining last minute too, to give us some additional insight.
Correct all my mistakes.
And yeah, we'll see you next time. I'll send out an invite for Corey's talk and what he's doing with principal component analysis. All right, great to see everybody.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. It's lovely to chat with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.